Did you ever wonder what became of the children who carried the legacy of a man known to his enemies as Old Blood and Guts? General George S. Patton, George S. Patton Jr. commanded massive armored thrusts across Europe in World War II. Yet his own family's story has remained largely in the background. Born of a lineage steeped in war and honor, Patton placed an imposing standard on his three children: Beatrice Smith, Ruth Ellen, and George Smith Patton IV. What followed was neither guaranteed glory nor simple inheritance. Their lives would unfold with courage, sacrifice, and unexpected turns. Here we count down from number 3 to number 1, the three children of General Patton, and reveal how each one navigated the shadow cast by the legend of their father. Number 3, Beatrice Ayer Patton Smith, born in 1911. Beatrice was the eldest of General George S. Patton's three children and the one who most reflected the quiet determination of her mother, Beatrice Ayer Patton. Raised amid the strict discipline and grandeur of a military household, she learned early that being a Patton meant composure, confidence, and duty, even under scrutiny. While her father's career took him from post to post, Beatrice matured under the twin pressures of public expectation and the loneliness of a transient life. Yet she grew into her own kind of strength, not on the battlefield, but within the social and cultural circles that surrounded the U.S. Army elite. Her upbringing was steeped in history. The Pattons and Ayers were old American families with roots deep in New England and the early wars of the Republic. Beatrice absorbed her father's sense of destiny, but tempered it with empathy, a quality her father rarely allowed himself. During World War II, when Patton's name was emblazoned across headlines, Beatrice found herself balancing pride and apprehension. She followed his campaigns through newsreels, sometimes defending his controversial remarks, sometimes quietly dreading the telegram that every military family feared. In 1934, she married John Waters Smith, a relationship that placed her squarely within the world of soldiers in service. Her husband was an officer who later became a respected general himself, wounded and captured in Tunisia during the war, the same campaign her father was fighting to win. When Patton's forces broke through in 1943, it was his army that liberated John Waters from the German prison camp at Hammelburg. Fate had wound the family's story into a single thread of war and reunion, each moment echoing her father's iron will. After the war, Beatrice built a quieter life as a mother and community figure. But the shadow of her father never disappeared. When he died in a car accident in 1945, she became one of the central guardians of his memory, helping preserve the Patton estate and his extensive papers for the public. Friends described her as gracious yet resolute, a woman who carried the Patton fire with restraint rather than spectacle. She passed away in 1952 at only 41 years old, leaving behind two children and a legacy of understated dignity. Number 2, Ruth Ellen Patton Totten, born in 1915. Ruth Ellen was the second child of General George S. Patton, and in many ways the emotional heart of the family. Where her father embodied command and her sister discipline, Ruth carried curiosity, a keen observer of both people and power. Growing up beneath the firm hand of the Patton household, she saw her father not as the distant icon the world revered, but as a complex man of fierce temper and surprising tenderness. She once described him as a storm with a mind, a phrase that captured both admiration and awe. Ruth Ellen attended Foxcroft School in Virginia and Smith College in Massachusetts, two bastions of upper-class education for young women of her era. Yet even amid privilege, she wrestled with the weight of her father's reputation. When Patton's wartime controversies erupted, his slapping of soldiers, his clashes with Allied command, Ruth Ellen felt their sting personally. Reporters often hounded her for comment, forcing her to navigate between loyalty and self-respect. It was a crucible that would forge her independent character. In 1937, she married Lieutenant Colonel John Knight Totten, another career officer who would later serve with distinction. Their union was a true partnership bound by shared understanding of duty. During World War II, as John served overseas, Ruth Ellen volunteered for the Red Cross and military support organizations, using her social standing to organize aid drives and morale efforts for troops and families. Like her mother, she became an anchor of grace in times of crisis. Her public composure reflecting an inner resilience inherited from the general himself. After the war, Ruth Ellen transformed from military daughter to outspoken writer. She authored memoirs and essays about her father and the Army world she knew so well, often offering insight into the private man behind the myth. In her book, The Button Box, she wrote candidly about growing up under George Patton's intensity, showing him not as an untouchable figure, but as a father who demanded greatness, yet feared failure. Her writing humanized him in a way that history books rarely did, giving readers a glimpse of the family that carried his burdens after his death. Ruth Ellen lived a long and full life, active in historical preservation and veterans' causes. She remained fiercely protective of her father's memory, yet never blind to his flaws. When she passed away in 1993, at the age of 78, she was remembered not simply as the general's daughter, but as a storyteller who bridged myth and memory, ensuring that the Patton name was not only shouted in command, but also spoken in reflection. Number 1. Major General George Smith, Patton IV. Born on December 24, 1923 in Boston, George Smith Patton IV was destined to carry not only his father's name, but also the immense weight of his legend. From his earliest days, the world seemed to expect a reincarnation of old blood and guts. But while the elder Patton had fought to prove America's will in Europe, the younger Patton would come of age in a century where war was less about glory and more about endurance. His life would become a mirror, sometimes reflecting, sometimes resisting the shadow of his father's myth. As a boy, George IV idolized his father, yet feared disappointing him. Letters from the general reveal the relentless expectations he placed on his son: excellence, courage, and control. When the elder Patton was killed in a car crash in 1945, George IV was just 21, already a graduate of West Point and a newly minted second lieutenant. His father's death turned him from heir apparent to torchbearer overnight. The family name had become both a sword and a shackle. He first saw combat during World War II, in the closing months of the European campaign. But his true tests came later in Korea and then Vietnam. As an armored officer, he rose steadily through the ranks, earning 2 Silver Stars, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, and multiple Purple Hearts. Soldiers who served under him often remarked on his presence: calm, deliberate, far quieter than his father, yet radiating the same intensity when under fire. In Vietnam, he commanded the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the same kind of formation his father had once dreamed of leading in modern mechanized warfare. But George IV's war was one of attrition and ambiguity. He fought in jungles instead of open plains, managed media scrutiny instead of triumphal parades, and led men who questioned why they fought at all. Where his father had relished bold statements, the son favored humility. "I learned that courage isn't about shouting orders," he once told a reporter. "It's about doing what you have to, even when no one cheers." It was a subtle defiance of his father's flamboyant legend, and yet perhaps the truest continuation of it. After Vietnam, he held command posts in Germany, eventually retiring as a major general in 1980. In a poetic full circle, his final assignment was at the same German base, where his father had once commanded during World War II. There he visited the graves of American soldiers who had served under both generations of Patton, a living link between 2 wars and 2 worlds. George Patton IV died in 2004 at the age of 80. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew veterans from every era, saluting the man who carried his father's name not as a boast, but as a burden well borne. On his gravestone, beneath the simple inscription, Major General George S. Patton IV. United States Army, lay the unspoken truth of his life, that he had lived with the weight of history and managed to turn inheritance into honor. The Patton children lived not merely as heirs to a name, but as keepers of a legacy that spanned war loss and the search for identity beyond fame. Each carried a fragment of their father's indomitable will: Beatrice with quiet grace, Ruth Ellen with introspective truth, and George IV with disciplined courage. Together they formed a living trilogy of the Patton spirit, each one proving in their own way that valor comes in many forms. History often remembers General George S. Patton Jr. as the fiery commander who pushed across Europe. But his family's story reveals another dimension, the human cost of greatness. His children bore his brilliance and his burdens, living in a world forever defined by the echo of his voice. Some fought their wars in uniform, others in memory. Yet all remained bound to the same creed: duty before comfort, integrity before applause. Decades after their passing, the Patton legacy endures not only in the monuments or military histories that celebrate the father, but in the quieter stories of the children who refused to let that legacy end with him. They transformed the weight of expectation into personal conviction, proving that heritage, when carried with humility, can evolve rather than imprison. And so, as history closes the chapter on the Patton line, it leaves us with a reminder that behind every legend stands a family, and behind every family a struggle to define what it truly means to live up to a name.